I'm Susanna Marsden, and welcome to Job Shadowing HE, the podcast that delves into the roles of people working in higher education. Each episode hears from guests about what's involved in their role, the career path that led to it, and tips on how to get in and get on in these jobs. My guest in this episode is John Schless, Head of Student Experience at the Royal College of Art, which positions itself as the world's most influential postgraduate institution of art and design. John's career spans a wide domain, having undertaken senior roles in the charity sector, followed by 6 years as Chief Executive of the Students' Union at the University of Greenwich, prior to starting his newly created strategic leadership role of Head of Student Experience at the RCA in June 2022. In this episode, John explores what leading the student experience means in the RCA, talks about his career path to date, and shares why the student experience and opportunity is at the centre of his personal motivation. So John, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you as my guest today. Let's kick off with an overview of the Royal College of Art and your role there. You're in the strategic leadership position of Head of Student Experience, which sounds like quite a job to have. Tell us more about the college and your role.
Thanks for having me, Susanna, and thanks for the invite. So yes, I am Head of Student Experience at the Royal College of Art, or the RCA, or we sometimes call ourselves the college. The RCA is the world number one art and design postgraduate institution in the world for 9 years in a row, and we're very proudly postgraduate and very proud of our status and standing in the higher education sector. We have the most incredible artists and designers, and we're close to just under 3,000 who are with us annually. And in my role, I report to Heather O'Keefe, our Chief Operating Officer, and I play a strategic and operational role, embedding students at the heart of what we do into the centre of the college. It's a new role. When I say new role, I'm coming up to 2 years in May. But it's been new for the college around establishing that piece in a postgraduate environment of our students. And of course, we've always been there for nearly 200 years for our students. But in the nature of the higher education sector as a postgraduate institution, we actually sit outside of the TEF and outside of some of those metrics that those in our undergraduate peers and colleagues will be very aware of around graduate outcomes and national student surveys. So there isn't necessarily those drivers around ensuring we're hitting those metrics, which ultimately are about our student. And there's pros and cons to that. And my role is to make sure that we are looking across all of our services, academia, and support-based services, and systems processes, and putting students at the centre of what we do. And in terms of a few bits of kind of development at the college, so we have recently launched a new flexible academic model, and so actually 23-4 is the first full year of what is a 1 year MA. So the majority of our programmes have moved from a 2-year masters to a 1 year masters, and that I've joined the college at the time of change, which is to embed and implement the new 1 year MA. And also the launch of new programmes, which include MDes, MRes, MFA, and we've got soon to have an MArch coming on board. That's called FAM2, and then there's a third phase in the future, which is around micro-credentials, more flexible parts of study, and that's a part of the pipeline for future.
So let's talk a bit more about job titles first of all. I mean, HE job titles are always interesting to explore. Not only in relation to their scope, but importantly, how they're understood by other colleagues. Your role at the college, as you said, was newly created when you joined in 2022. And the job of Head of Student Experience does sound quite powerful. So I'm wondering, has that title been a help or a hindrance to you? And also, what approach have you taken to working with colleagues to foster a shared ownership of the student experience?
Yes, it does have a lot of power to it, doesn't it? A lot of weight. But I think the challenge actually is to have it as one single person and role. It's a bit of a risk actually, because it's kind of deemed as anything student related is for this person. That's John's thing to pick up, which makes the role quite broad and the scope very broad. I do sit within a senior management position, but the title actually doesn't necessarily reflect that. But actually, it's not, in my view, it doesn't matter. Title's title, right? It's about what you do. And actually, I joined RCA knowing there was a job to be done and to work with Heather and the broader team around embedding and improving our practice and making sure we're putting our students at the heart and student at the centre. And I think it's really important to caveat, it's not to say that there aren't amazing people doing amazing things with our students and really caring and looking after them. It's about everything in the round and how we bring together all that great local practice as a kind of standardised practice for within our academic teams or within our professional services teams, and actually ensure that our students are really being listened to, or we're communicating back to them when we can't do something and the why, and having that conduit is important. I've seen it as an opportunity in terms of as a title. So I do have to challenge, I suppose, the hierarchy, and I have to kind of work within a matrix management structure. And actually, that's why I took the job. Some would say, why did you do that? And, but actually, I wanted to learn and to kind of experience in a bigger organisation and the opportunity of getting things done regardless of kind of title and position. I can find myself being a kind of a sorter, fixer and deliverer, but also that is my character and I think my strength as a strategic operator. And so what I try to do is be myself. But I do recognise it does sometimes ruffle feathers, and it's not intentional to my peers and colleagues. It's about really thinking about what we're doing for our students and have we really taken our individual areas and all stepped back and looked at that broader offer.
And both of us have worked in HE for significant periods of time, and we know that overseeing the student experience and making it work well is actually a much more complex task than some people might imagine. And you've just outlined a few bits there. I mean, you mentioned earlier that the college is a solely postgraduate and specialist institution. And I'm wondering, does that more niche setting make the student experience easier or more difficult to oversee than, say, in a large multi-faculty university? And does it bring the same or different challenges?
So I used to be at the University of Greenwich, and we'll come on to that a bit later. But in terms of that was a large post-92 undergraduate and growing institution. And so coming to the RCA, yes, it was very different in its culture and setup. But actually, the longer I'm there, the more I see the issues are incredibly similar. And actually, our student population, 2/3 of our students are under 25. They are master's students. But actually, they've had an undergraduate experience and they are bringing those experiences and expectations into their postgraduate experience. And I think that is the culture shift for the college that we're trying to make, to kind of recognise that those pressures that come from an undergraduate experience are a part of our offer. I think the challenge is sometimes around scale. So we are over £100 million in turnover. That's a lot of money, but we're not the scale of some undergraduate institutions and have the scale of resources, but we still need to deliver the same services. And so actually a lot of it is around the capacity building and the confidence for our staff teams dealing with behaviours and dealing with kind of challenge and feedback from students. And look, they're postgraduate, they're really bright, they're the best in the world. So, expectations are high. What they want from us is high, and actually, regardless of the cost and the shifts of a UK fee and an international fee, our students really feel the cost and the investment they're making in their postgraduate education, and they're expecting a lot from us. And I think that's the reality of the market they're all dealing with, but also that does add further pressure around their expectation. Our reputation does precede us, and I think that's something we have to kind of always manage. And with our students, we also have access to the world-leading facilities, but it's not a free-for-all. And actually, an expectation of some of our students is great. I'll just go and experiment every day, and I'm doing my specialism here, but I want to use the kiln, do the print lab, but actually there are specialist programs that need that kiln and need that print lab, and there's a prioritisation that goes into that. So we have to navigate that. But I also find with our students there's a higher proportion of SPLD, and so therefore our wraparound support services and our inclusion plan support becomes really fundamental. And but rightly, our students are expecting that help as they arrive. So I think the final bit around feedback is, it's difficult to get feedback from our postgrad students, but when they give it, my goodness, is it fantastic feedback and is it robust? And there's a tenacity in that feedback that all the way through to a whole complaints process. And why not? Because they really want us to kind of see through they're right. And so educating ourselves to not be upset by that and just to go through the process and also learn from it and get ahead of the problems and possible problems is a lot of what I do.
So before you became head of student experience at the RCA, as you mentioned, you were at Greenwich. You were the chief executive of the Students' Union there for, I think, 6 years, an organisation that I think has well over 20,000 students. And prior to being at Greenwich, you had senior roles in the charity sector. So it's quite an interesting career path you've got there so far. What reflections do you have on your professional development and growth across that time?
I'm really proud of myself, actually. I've reflected on this question. I'm proud of myself. And when you have a bad day, you're like, oh, it's a difficult day. And I have to step back and go, hold on, you are in a position of privilege and you have worked hard for that. And you do have, I suppose, access and the opportunity to shape and really feed back and do something good. And if I think back to the early career, really difficult days as a fundraiser, which can be very isolating when you're particularly young in your career, trying to raise money and all the targets and the anxiety that can bring. It's a completely different feeling. And I remember joining Greenwich and GSU as chief exec, and I grew GSU from a 1 million turnover to over 4 million by the time I left in summer 22. What I've learned is I'm really good with people, and I do like to chase the money in the context of the fundraiser sits within, but it's about the outcome and what we can do with that. And I don't want to see waste. I want it to be delivered well. And I know we're having a tough time as a HE sector, but we are very fortunate compared to other charity sector experiences I've been in. And I think I'm able to bring that kind of mindset in because I've experienced that. I'm a strategic operator, and I think as a career path coming to RCA, I kind of made that call around I've established myself on a path to running an organisation, and I'm really proud. It was really hard to leave Greenwich actually, but I had the opportunity to join RCA and I suppose go into an institution. And I spent 6 years having a go at the institution. So, I worked with our student officers and our team to really kind of challenge back at the institution. And I've, I suppose, gone to the other side. But I had to think about that as a pathway. And, it was a wrench. And I really kind of thought it through. But I just figured it provides a different gear shift and a different opportunity to explore. And I'm very much doing that at RCA.
So after that 6 years as CEO at the Students' Union, you did make that transition, as you say, to the other side of university life into your head of student experience role at the RCA. I mean, that is a big change for all sorts of reasons. And you've mentioned a bit there about it being, a big deal for you to move. What was the real motivation for you to make that move into the institutional role?
I found it harder than I thought I would. I think that was a real... It really took me about 6 months to kind of settle in and go, gosh, what have I done? Not that I was upset at RCA. It was just about this kind of, gosh, I've thought I've made this decision, and then actually this is how I feel about it. I was headhunted to the RCA, and Emma Wilkins from Dixon Walter played a key role in that and was an amazing recruiter actually, and was really clear. And actually Heather O'Keefe, my our COO, was really clear about what she needed and why she was interested in a candidate like myself, and was very clear about the challenges ahead before I accepted. And therefore I was like, actually, you do need me, you need that help. And I think, I want to come and have a go at that. And it was, as I said in the previous question, I had spent 6 years working with our officers and building that relationship with the institution and kind of having a go at the institution. And I figure it's probably about time to experience it from the other side and to help the institution and the organisation in itself. And I also thought it probably will open a different career path. So I've got access at a leadership role, and to the leadership, there's the whole matrix piece to understand and also learn parts of the uni business that I wouldn't have engaged with in a role as a chief exec of an SU. So very much have that opportunity at RCA, and it's allowing me to think about what in future what comes next. And I think there are a series of paths that can come from that. So it was a kind of a purposeful decision, but it was hard. It was hard to leave, and here I am.
And reflecting on that transition a bit more, I mean, at Greenwich, you were the CEO of the Students' Union, and we've talked about the size of that, and therefore the person who was ultimately in charge of that organisation. And then you move into the RCA Head of Student Experience role, which offered quite a different type of leadership responsibility. What was that transition like for you? And what would you say are the pros and cons of moving in that sort of direction?
It was more challenging than I thought, partly because of ego, actually. You've got to put the ego in check. And being a chief exec is not about me, but you realise how much your character and the oversight I got to run the organisation and run the governance and be a final decision maker, actually, with amazing team around me. But the transition is about navigating a new role and navigating new people and new people politics and new governance. And everyone's been really lovely at RCA, but I joined at a point where, and I actually only saw this recently, we've grown by 30% in staffing terms over the last 2.5 years as part of preparing for the new one-year MA. And that's massive. That is really culture. That's a big cultural shift in the organisation, and I'm a part of that change. So, the opportunity to move provided the things I'm good at, which is building team and dealing with change and helping with governance. And I am doing that at RCA, but I'm doing it in a different way than I was as chief exec, where I ultimately was kind of really driving the governance with the chair and with our student leaders. So, but again, I taking the role at RCA, I suppose it wasn't too big an organisation to just be lost in a directorate. I had opportunities to kind of run bigger directorates in bigger organisations, but you ironically would have been less connected to the central governance. And I thought actually this provides me the opportunity to really see and embed in that central governance. So I do go and present to our council and some of our committees and write papers. And go to our SMT meets and meet with the VC and the team regularly. But which is, I think, in a bigger HE, if I can see people don't do that, even though they have a bigger title and technically a bigger role. So it's provided that connection, and that's the similarity, I think, from being the CEO. Whether I want to be a CEO in future, that's something to consider. Like this has been a career test, and I'm coming up to 2 years at RCA. And I've learned a lot, but I do miss some of their governance, and there's a series of routes in time to think about what's next.
And you moved from the organisation type, didn't you, through that change from a students' union to a university or college setting, and obviously you had that familiarity with the university side of things. But I'm wondering, did anything surprise you about working within an institutional setting when you moved into that role?
Yes, the gear of governance. So I used to have a badge actually at Greenwich that was it's all about the governance, and that's from like the charity training I had, and it really is. But unis love governance, but I think can sometimes hide behind the governance. I say in inverted commas, and I think the change is really going into a bigger setting, and where's the terms of reference and this kind of when I'm like as a character like this needs to be done. How we can get caught in the process of governance. And also it can be a bit dramatic, actually. There's something that I'm like, hold on, this is not a problem. And as chief exec, I would just stop. No, we're not having this discussion. Is a problem. And all of a sudden, you're kind of presenting at a board or a committee on something like, why are we even talking about this? But there's a whole group of other stakeholders that might hear something, and it's about quashing that rumour and making it really clear about this is what happened or how it was handled. I think it's worth noting, though, student unions really do have a lot of power and influence, and going into the institution and seeing when the note comes from the student president or officer into the VC's inbox or one of the director's inboxes, and however on, there's a kind of, oh God, panic, we would have ready to respond. And a lot of my job has been helping RCA improve that relationship, and it's in a much better place. And we have a really great partnership with our SU and new agreements and ways we work together. But actually, it's for those SU colleagues who listen to this podcast to remember and don't take that for advantage, because actually a lot of staff most staff actually in a university don't have that access, and I would really relish that and that opportunity, or some of them run away from it. I get that, but also recognising how hard student union teams do work, and there's a difference in terms of comparable of pay, and there'd be a kind of call from me to our HE partners to really think about that subvention and the pay parities, because actually when you've got a really great student union working with you, you're going to get a much better student offer and student experience, and actually makes everybody's life easier. And I suppose I've got quite a special understanding of that and the feeling of that.
So let's move back now to the student experience and your day-to-day focus. As you say, you've been in the post for nearly 2 years. Can you tell us more about how that time frame has panned out? How has your focus evolved, or is it still evolving in relation to strategic priorities?
I can't believe it's nearly 2 years, actually. It's quite frightening, the pace. The key piece, I've come into RCA at the time of the launch of our strategy 22 to 27, and that set out a direction. And the first couple of years of that, which we're coming to the end of the second year, is really about re-establishing and settling the base of the organisation, because it had gone through such growth, change, and a big, like many places, a big staff turnover in that summer 21-22, and a lot of new people in that leadership team. But in that first year, I've done a lot of establishing and building the team. So establishing our student centre and realigning our how our advice and wellbeing team operates, and how we manage risk and safeguarding and transparency in services and measures and outcomes, which none of this was in place at all. And it is now, and it's taking the team on the journey for that. And they responded well, but it has been tough. And I thank the team for their patience with me, but I'm still going to be tenacious, because there's a reason we're funded and we need to be able to demonstrate outcome. I've also established our funding and scholarships team. We're giving away over £5 million a year at RCA, which is incredible in terms of our 100 million turnover. We want to get to 8% of turnover by 2027. We're well on the way to that. That needs to be managed and measured and understood, and that's amazing what happens there, by the way. But it's what I've done is ensure we've really got rigorous processes in. I oversee our SU relationship, I oversee our complaints and misconduct, and it's been establishing policies in that first year, because it'd been a long time since they've been reviewed. And then this second year has been really about picking up that PTES, PRES feedback, and really starting to kind of what we're doing with that, and what's our approach to handling that feedback. We've had an audit from PwC, our audit partner, last summer, that has recommendations that to be acted upon. And also establishing careers at the college. We don't have a careers offer. We are soon to have our very first careers advisor to join the team. That's a really tough gig, one person for one postgraduate, a 3,000 student postgraduate institution. But the point is about starting to embed good practice and bringing in our peers, our amazing alumni to work with our students. A lot of it is also challenging the status quo this last year. I've had the opportunity to observe for a bit and learn, and then be like, no, we need to change this, which is tough, because sometimes it can feel quite lonely, and it's about how I have to take people with me, even if they don't work within my sphere or my team, and that is quite challenging. But also, I know it's also why I was recruited, right? And when you're a chief exec, it is quite lonely, so. I'm used to that. I've also had this kind of side note. I've had this reality of, oh gosh, there's all these people around me and team. Like, what's that about? All these peers. I've not I've been quite isolated as a fundraiser and a chief exec, and it's taken me a bit of time to adjust, to be like, oh, I can actually just go and talk to a colleague, because we are literally peers, and I'm no longer in the SU having a go at the director of student academic services. Come on, not that they weren't a peer and they didn't support, but there's always that slight tension, and that's changed. And then moving forward, as I mentioned, we've got a new president vice chancellor starting in April. There is a major piece around student life cycle, like many of our institutions, and there's some immediate pieces around our technology and student record system that are an absolute priority. But the strategic part of what are we doing for our students, our customer, over the next kind of 3-5 years, and how does that embed entry to exit and all those systems, processes, services, and how we challenge our status quo and our technology. That is like the next focus, and also elevating just basically the student offer, because their expectations are only going to get higher. So and we know that across our sector. So embedding that in RCA into the future is this next phase as we move into 20 5 and beyond.
And reflecting on what you've said there, I mean, the role that you have sounds demanding. You're leading significant transformation in the organisation, and your other roles have sounded very demanding as well, your previous roles. But I know that you've also found time to take on trustee roles with other organisations, with everything that you do. What approach do you take to balancing your different commitments, and what motivates you to get involved in that wider portfolio of activities?
Well, I'm very lucky to have a very patient husband of 10 years. We've been together 16 years in total, and he's not in this sector. He's having a different focus. He works very hard, but a different focus of how he wants to run his career. So he, in a way, lets me deal with the stress I suppose I put on myself and the challenge I put on myself. And he's also there to listen when I'm having my rant or thinking it through. And he's completely outside of it. That's very helpful. My career has always had beneficiary or at the focus. So I've got a in terms of my own values and what motivates me, there's got to be a reason. It's not for profit. It's for people. So and that has influenced my choices. And I haven't necessarily done it strategically in a career, but actually looking back, that is the motive. That is the motivator for me. I think in terms of taking up opportunities, I think we should all be doing that actually, if you can. But I've done a bit less in this last 18 months, just while I was setting back up. And however, I'm just about to join another charity, and it's like a local grant fund in a couple of weeks as a trustee. And I think it keeps up your governance experience. It kind of gives you an opportunity to share your practice and build your network. And also just to kind of, you sometimes in those settings being like, hold on, like, no, that's a really great thing actually. Why aren't we doing that in our organisation and taking back that learning? And the flip being like, no, let me share our experience about how we make a decision here. So, I highly recommend it. I also mentor emerging leaders and new leaders. I've done that for quite a few years actually, and that's really rewarding. And once they're no longer emerging leaders, kind of keeping connected and seeing that those people thrive has been a wonderful thing. What I hadn't understood when I took the job at GSU actually was how those wonderful student officers would kind of get a grip and be a part of my life. And actually, I saw 7-8 teams of officers at Greenwich in my 6 years come through. And I'm in touch with a high proportion of them and going to some of their weddings and constantly call for references or meet up with some of them for a walk or a coffee or a pint. And that is a wonderful thing that came out of a role that, of course, and it's kind of obvious to say, but actually there was such a mentorship part of that role. And that really has stuck with me, and how I can keep with that. And I mentor internally at RCA as well, because I think that's important.
So finishing up our conversation today, John, I'd like to set what you've talked about into a wider context. I mean, the needs of higher education are changing, and that means the range and depth of experiences that colleagues need to have to enable that environment to happen well. And talking with you today, I mean, I'd say you're in quite an enviable position where the breadth of your leadership experiences and that personal motivation that you've just talked about there really provide quite a platform for next steps. What do you see as the potential career pathways into the future? Doing this has been, I have moments where I'm like, oh gosh, what am I doing? Am I too siloed? Whatever, so I have self-doubt. But I am a strategic operator. And so I always describe it as, I don't mind having the microphone and being on stage. That's fine. But I don't need to be completely at the front. I don't need that. I can do it, but I don't mind working with others and for others. But I do need to be in a position of influence and delivery, and I'm good at doing that. And so as long as there's a really clear set of values and a purpose, and I think that really works in a HE setting. And so I think there's a direction of travel around the coup and the chief operating officer piece, and I am established in that.
but translating that and having universities understand that is often the challenge. So that's again a reason to kind of move to RCAs, to kind of show and demonstrate that experience. I'm often challenged around, what's your lane, John? Are you registry? Are you HR? Are you don't run estates? And I'm a bit like, well, actually my lane is the benefit as I've got a broad scope and an understanding of multiple areas that I can put my hand to lots of things well. And also I can roll my sleeves up and sort it out. But I know I'm good at just stepping back and saying, hold on, there's a bigger picture here. So, there's options around future charity leadership and HE leadership. I would like to stay in this HE space and to develop further. And I hope to continue to get the opportunity. And, to recruiters that listen to podcasts like this, I hear, scale, size. It's really hard in a small organisation. You get access to a lot of things and you do a lot. And actually, going larger is actually not the challenge, because you in a way you do less when you go larger. So I don't worry about smaller organisational leaders. We're very skilled.
John, it's been great talking to you today. Thanks so much for being my guest.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Job Shadowing HE. The podcast was written and presented by Susanna Marsden, audio production and music by me, Rodri Marsden. More information about this podcast and previous episodes can be found at jobshadowinghe.podbean.com.